So kind of what this slide says, but today we're going to get an introduction to programming. And first, just a little bit about Kepler Group, which is the company where both Kevin and I work, as well as a little bit about us. So Kepler Group is a digital marketing agency. And what that means is that we serve digital ads basically anywhere that digital ads could be served. So that's places like Google or Facebook or TikTok, or even, for example, digital billboards. And we do that for a lot of our clients. So this is just a short list of our clients, but we serve various different Fortune 500 companies. And then to go into a little bit about our technology, because this is an intro to programming training. So a lot of what our team does is we ingest data from a lot of different sources, and that could be ad data, but it could also be things like maybe weather data and COVID data. We're also in charge of storing that data for our analytics team and reporting team to be able to use it and analyze it, as well as we build out a lot of different dashboards and feeds that basically allow our teams to be more effective in building and serving those digital ads. Cool. So next up, Kevin was going to introduce himself. I don't know if he's back. Kevin, are you back? No, he's not back. Okay. Let me just, I'll let him introduce himself when he gets back. For now, I will just introduce myself and tell you a little bit about my journey into programming. So I actually did not start my career in the field. I was actually doing marketing at a company. This was an e-commerce website. And at some point they needed changes made. They had some new product with new colors that they wanted to display, but unfortunately the software engineer at the time was out. So they were like, hey, do you mind trying your hand at this to see if you can actually get the colors up on the website? At which point, I sort of started to dive into that and learn a little bit more about HTML. And, I was just surprised by how enjoyable it was. It was something I was able to do for hours and able to build this thing. And it was really exciting for me. And that's sort of like my first exposure to programming. And then at that point, I was like, okay, this is really cool. This is something I can make a career out of. At which point I joined Flatiron School, which is a boot camp where they basically prepare you with everything you need to know in order to get into the field. And that's when after that, started at Kepler Group and still do programming today. It's something that I still enjoy because it gives me the opportunity to continue to learn new things every day. And it's empowering to be able to build things from scratch. Cool. I know that wasn't much, but I'll just briefly pause here for questions to see if anyone had any. If not, we can continue. All right. Awesome. Great. So getting started, diving into the presentation a little bit. So what we're going to cover today is one, just understand what programming is, right? So we're talking about programming. We want to know, exactly what that is, as well as understand what we can do with it. Like, why should you care? Why should you want to learn about it? That sort of thing. And then this is where Kevin is going to take over and teach us a little bit about the Python programming language. So Python is a language that we can actually use to build and create things. And once we sort of get an introduction to that, hopefully what we'll do is we'll have breakout sessions where we can all sort of build a fun little game using the Python that we just learned. All right. So first, to discuss a little bit about programming. What programming is, it's the act of telling the computer what to do. And it's also just one part of software development. So as programmers, it's not like we sit and code all day, but we do a lot of different things like planning and design and testing and problem solving. And it's also a surprisingly creative process because as programmers, we build and create different things, and the things that we need to build require coming up with creative solutions to those problems. Now, a little bit about what a programming language is. So the first thing is that it's formal. It's not like natural language where maybe you might listen to what I'm saying and I'm saying a lot of ums and likes, but you still sort of get the main gist of what I'm trying to say. With a programming language, that's not the case. So we need to be extremely precise with our language. If we add extra commas or extra semicolons or anything like that, the program may not be able to run because the computer won't understand what it is that it has to do. It also has to have the ability to communicate instructions to a machine, right? So the program is running on our computer, and the computer, it's very important for the computer to understand what it is that the program needs to do. But also, just as importantly, it also needs to be able to convey ideas to humans, right? We're the ones that are writing those programs and reading those programs, and we need to understand what it is that it's doing. So now a little bit to understand what a program is. So a program is really just a file on your computer that's filled with text, and that text is what we call code. And then what that program needs to do is kind of what we said earlier. It needs to be able to convey instructions to machines as well as to humans. So because the computer only speaks in zeros and ones, our program will need to convert the language that it has, which is something that we as humans can understand, into something the machine can understand. So, you know, it'd be very tiresome if we have to write everything in zeros and ones. That would not be fun for anyone. So we write it in a programming language, which then gets converted into zeros and ones so that it can run on the computer. Now, here's where we talk a little bit about the benefits and what you can do with a program. So the first thing that a program allows us to do is it allows us to build and create different things. It allows us to solve, you know, real life problems or imaginary problems. For example, if you're Mark Zuckerberg and you're in college and maybe you don't want to ask somebody whether they're single or not, you might solve that problem by building Facebook. Secondly, it allows us to automate things. So whether we're doing any sort of tedious tasks again and again, a program will allow us to sort of automate that and set it and forget it, and then we never have to think about it again, and the program does the work for us. So, you know, for an example of that, I have a little robotic vacuum cleaner, and that's sort of a program that does my work for me. And lastly, some of the benefits of learning a programming language is that it helps us build transferable skills. So kind of what Jared said initially, but these are skills that we may already have or skills that we could build up, which serve us in other areas as well. Because writing a program typically involves breaking down a big problem into smaller problems. So that's building up our problem solving skills, as well as when we're debugging, maybe we have to find a small problem in a big system. And those are skills that we can use in other areas as well. All right, so now that we hopefully understand a little bit about what the benefits are, I'll just move on here to the last section and then I'll pause for questions. But just to understand a little bit of what we expect from a program. So the first thing is we expect it to be portable, right? If I'm writing it on my machine, I don't want it to just be able to run on my computer. Maybe I want it to run on Kevin's computer as well. For example, if you're writing something for the web, maybe you want it to run in a browser, but you want it to run in different browsers and things like that. So we expect it to be portable and work everywhere we need it to work. We also expect it to be readable, right? Because we're the ones that are going to have to understand what the program is doing. So we need to be able to read it, as well as we expect it to be simple, right? So if it's super complex, maybe it's going to take a really long time for us to wrap our heads around what the program is doing. And so that's not going to be great. So we want it to be as simple as possible so that we can understand it. And we also expect it to be fast, right? Because now maybe we have this great program that's doing what we want, but we don't want to have to wait hours for it to do what we need it to do. So we want it to be fast. but also stable, right? Because now we're relying on this program and, maybe it's doing what it needs to do. We want to be able to continue to rely on it so that it doesn't break. And then, we can no longer rely on it. Now, each of these kind of builds one on top of the other, and each of these is hard, right? That's a lot to expect from a program. But really, at its core, foundationally, first and foremost, what we expect a program to do is be able to solve whatever problem we're trying to solve by telling the computer what it is that it needs to do. So we'll kind of, getting back to that initial thing, how do we tell a program what to do? We're going to do that today with a programming language called Python. And this is the Python symbol, if you're wondering why this is the image. And just a little bit about Python before we actually get started talking about the details is that it's a multi-purpose programming language. And what we mean by that is it can run in a lot of different places, and a lot of different people use it, right? Not just software engineers, but maybe data analysts and data scientists all use Python. It's also, based on recent surveys, one of the most popular languages, so it's used a lot, as well as one of the most loved programming languages. So people that use it are having a good time. They're not miserable using it. So now kind of, I believe Kevin is back, which is good. He will show us, awesome, more about what that looks like. But before I guess we switch gears, are there any questions about anything that I said?
So please either raise your hands or feel free to come off mute if you have a question.
I think my question is, was it like hard to pick up at first, or like were there any challenges that you guys faced?
Sorry, I think I missed the first portion of your question. You said, was it hard for what?
Was it hard to pick up at first, and were there any challenges?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's still constantly, and I guess just to clarify, what you're asking is to pick up a programming language, right? Yes. I think it's still hard. Oftentimes I'm faced with problems that I don't know how to solve. I would say the thing that gets better with time is learning how to learn, which is hopefully a little bit of what we'll see to do today. But the idea that, learning that when you don't know something, what do I do? How do I break down this problem? How do I look up the answers so that I get what I need? But I would definitely say it's a constant learning curve. You're constantly learning new things, but hopefully with time you're learning more about how to learn those things. Cool. Thanks for that question. I guess I will hand it over to Kevin. And Kevin, if you want to introduce yourself as well, because I kind of skipped over that part.
Well, my computer seemed like it got very excited when everyone joined, and it decided to just, stop working for me, which is exactly what you want from your programming teacher, is for their computer not to work. So happy to be back. Sorry about getting kicked, and sorry I missed the introduction, but yeah, my name is Kevin. I'm a senior software engineer at Kepler Group, and I believe Leah already talked a little bit about Kepler Group. But I'm excited to tell you guys how I got into programming, which I was supposed to do in the beginning. But I really never thought of it as an interest for most of my youth, I'd say, until I got forced upon it in college. I missed my class registration. So if you have a chance to register for classes in college, I would suggest not missing that chance, because I got left with the least popular classes of all the classes. And this one was called Introduction to Computational Design, which was the worst name by far. I missed out on things like bridge building and robot building. But it turns out that was a programming class. And I had no idea what programming was at the time. And to address the question that was first asked, I was so confused for the beginning of that class. until slowly things started to click. And I realized that this is fun. Solving problems in this way is fun. I enjoy looking at some abstract thing and trying to distill it down into commands I can tell a computer to do, because that's hard. And sometimes doing something that's hard can be very rewarding. So here I am today working as a programmer, which I would have never guessed, but I'm very happy for it. So let's get started. So what I have in front of me may look a little weird, and I just want to explain this before we hop into the details. Leah mentioned that programming is about giving instructions to the computer about what to do, and that's what this space here on the left is for. Here is where we will be writing our code, and then we'll press this run button, and any of our output, anything we print out, is going to pop up over here in the console. And the console is a weird name, right? But all we have to think about it for now is this is where our output goes. So we have code here on the left, output here on the right. And coding is all about solving our problems. And fortunately, we do have a problem that we need solving. Although unfortunately, it seems as the problem is us. We have been misbehaving in all of our school classes because we've been in the back on our computers learning Python this entire school year. And our teachers have taken notice, and they are not very happy about it. And now we are faced with the issue that we have to write all of our teachers some apology letter for our misbehavior in their class. But we are smart. We know we can use Python to help us with this problem. And that way we can, while apologizing for learning Python in our class, continue to learn about it by solving it with some hands-on activity. So the first thing we want to figure out is if we want our Python to output something over here on the console, our apology letter, for example. Cool. And we are writing this part because we want to know how to tell Python to put some words over here on the console. And I don't know how much of what I said got through, but I think an easy way for us to think about this code here on the left is that our program is just instructions and data. There are things to do, and then there's data that you do those things on. And in this case, the data is our apology letter, or at least the start of it, right? It is Dear Miss Leah. And how are we doing, Leah? Am I connected?
You're still good.
Great. And the action we're going to take on this data is outside of the data itself, right? So we say print, and that's the action we want to do. And then Python says, okay, well, what should I print for you? And then we have to say, here's my data, and I'm going to start my data with a little quote. Because otherwise, Python will think all these words are more actions I should be taking. But really, they're just our words. And in Python, we call words strings. And it's a little weird, but we call it strings because it's like a string of letters or a string of characters, say. Good, Leah? Great, because I am about to write more of my apology letter to you. But I think an easy way to wrap this part up, to think about it, is, again, there are instructions, commands, or things to do, and then there's data that you do it on. So in Spotify, you might press play, and the action you're taking is play, and the data is the song itself. Here in Python, in the much simpler world, the action we're taking is printing, and the data is our words or our apology letter. So I can write out the rest of our apology letter. I can say, Dear Miss Leah, I know I've misbehaved, and I am so very sorry. Please forgive me. Print, sincerely, Kevin. Now, each of these lines is an instruction to Python. The first thing we're doing is we're printing Dear Miss Leah. And then the next line, we're printing new words, and so on and so forth. And so when I run this, does someone have any guesses on what's going to happen over here in the console?
Gonna write it out.
Let's see it, shall we? Beautiful. We have a nice apology letter over here in our console, but I'm sure many of you are asking, what is the point? Because it seems like we've just wrote our apology letter, but with extra words and having to write print and parentheses and quotes in a bunch of places, right? But remember, the main issue we're solving is we have to write this apology letter to all of our teachers. And this is the time-consuming part. So now we're going to find a way to write this apology letter, but to all of our teachers all at once. So the first thing we want to do is separate this idea of our teacher from the rest of the apology letter itself, so we can change it. So it can be different teachers like Mr. Kevin. And to do that, I want to introduce a concept that might seem a little weird at first, but I'm hoping the more we play with it, the more familiar it will get. And this is the concept of a variable. Now, bear with me as I type this out. A variable is like a box with a label. And inside that box is where you put your data. So I'm going to label this box my underscore teacher. Now, the labels are a little weird. I can't use spaces in my labels in Python. So I use an underscore instead. And now that I have my label, I have to tell Python, all right, what are we going to put inside of this box? And in this box in particular, I'm going to put my teacher's name, Miss Leah.
All right, so same deal, kind of what Kevin was showing. I'll just go ahead and try to replicate that. So we have Dear Mr. Kevin. We'll say, sorry for misbehaving. I don't exactly remember what Kevin had, but let's just keep it simple. Sincerely, and this time it'll be me. Okay, so I think getting back to the point about a variable. So we have, my teacher, which is equal to Mr. Kevin. And so what Kevin was getting at is, why are we doing this, right? This seems simple to me, this seems straightforward, but let's discuss a little bit about variables and why we care about them. So I think the point that Kevin was getting at, right where he cut out, was that let's say you're moving, and you want your friend to grab the box for you from the room, rather than having to say, hey, can you grab my shirt, hat, pants, and so on, what we can instead say is, hey, can you grab the box labeled clothes, right? And that's a lot easier for your friend to grab, and it just takes a lot less time. And every time you say, hey, grab the box labeled clothes, your friend knows exactly what you're referring to, even though they may not know or care what's in the box labeled clothes. So similarly, that's what a variable is. So a variable is saying we're going to give it a label called my teacher, and whatever goes inside that box, Python doesn't care. It's like, I don't care what is in that box, but every time you tell me my teacher, I'll just know what box to grab. And so the benefit of this is, let's say, it's what we call abstraction in programming is, now let's say we can print here, dear, and then we'll just say on another line for now, my teacher. Let's see what happens now. Does anyone want to take a guess for what's going to happen?
I think it's gonna put in the variable that you put as my teacher. So in this case, it'll put Mr. Kevin.
Yes, that's a great guess. Let's see if that's what happens. Awesome. Yep. So it looks like because we kind of gave it this label, it's like, okay, I'll just grab whatever's in that box for you and print it out. Cool. let's just see if, I think I saw Kevin join, but I don't know if he's back. I'll keep going, but Kevin, if you're here, is he? No.
I am
Oh,
back. I'm so sorry, everyone. I changed computers this time. I'm borrowing another one. So I think this one might be a little bit better. Great. So now we're at a point where we have almost what we want, right? We have dear, a space, and a new line, Mr. Kevin, sorry for misbehaving, sincerely, Leah. But this still doesn't seem like it's that useful, right? It still seems like we're having to write out all this extra stuff and really we're not seeing any benefits yet. And wouldn't it be better if we were able to do this for all of our teachers? Somehow, instead of just having a single teacher here, we had my teachers. And instead of this being just Mr. Kevin, this was a list of all the teachers we've upset and all the teachers we need to apologize to. Luckily, Python will let us do that. And again, this may seem a little bit weird, but stick with me. We're, instead of having a single teacher, we're going to create a list of teachers. And the way we're going to do that is by adding some braces around our teachers. And then inside put Mr. Kevin, and Miss Leah will be joining us again. And perhaps, who's another good one? I was using Thanos before. Mr. Thanos will do. And what's another decent name? Got one, Mr. or Miss or Mrs. Mr. Teacher will do. Mr. Teacher will do. And so now instead of printing, dear my teacher, I'm going to change and say, my teacher, sorry for misbehaving, Leah. Now, what do we think is going to happen? We have a list of teachers and we are printing, dear all of my teachers, sorry for misbehaving, sincerely, Leah. Anyone have any thoughts? Yeah, I think I see a raised hand, but I can't see a name, but go for it.
Echo, you can go ahead.
Sorry, I'm having camera troubles, but it's gonna set a different command to send this specific email to the various teachers under the name my teachers, which is Mr. Kevin, Miss Leah, Mr. Danos, and Mr. Teacher.
All right, let us run and see. I missed some of it, but let us run and see and test our expectations, right? This is a little weird, right? I don't think this is what we want necessarily, but it kind of makes sense. We're saying dear, and then we're printing out a list of all of our teachers, and we're saying, sorry for misbehaving, sincerely, Leah. Now, I think if we sent them an email, I think they'd be pretty upset with this email. Clearly, we are trying to avoid doing all of our apology letters, and we are not doing a very good job, right? So let's say in English, what do we want to do? For all of our teachers, Mr. Kevin, Miss Leah, Mr. Thanos, and Mr. Teacher, we want to write a new apology letter. Dear that teacher, sorry for misbehaving, sincerely, Leah. And this is something we can translate into Python pretty nicely. Instead of saying, dear all of my teachers, rest of apology letter, we're going to say, for my teacher, and sorry, let me just turn off the code intelligence so we don't get that thing. For my teacher in my list of teachers, and I know this might seem a little weird, but we're moving fast, let's just stick with it. And then Python, because it's a very specific language and we have to speak with the grammar that it expects, we have to put a colon at the end. And we have to indent, we have to tab all of these lines one time in. And now instead of saying, dear my teachers, we're going to change this back to a singular teacher. And now if we take a step back and we read it all, we say, we have a list of all my teachers. And for each teacher in that list, I'm going to write a new apology letter. Now, what do we think is going to happen?
When you press run, each teacher is going to get the apology letter with just their name. So it won't be like all the other names.
Excellent. Let's see, shall we? Now we run it. And it looks like we're getting closer to what we want, right? We have, dear Mr. Kevin, sorry for misbehaving, sincerely, Leah. And I think to help us see this better, I'm going to add just some lines here at the end so we can really see all the individual apology letters we're writing. And one of the beauties of programming and one of the beauties of using variables is now if, say, we've upset another teacher, we don't have to go in and change all of our code, right? We can just come in here at the end of our list and add Mr. Another teacher and just hit run. And now here at the bottom, we've generated a new apology letter for Mr. Another teacher. And our program has been so good, we're in all sorts of trouble that now our friends are interested. Now our friends want to learn Python in all their classes. And they need to be writing some apology letters as well. So they ask you to use this program. They say, hey, Kevin, this is excellent. Can I use it? But of course, I'm going to need to use my name in it instead of yours. Is that all right? And you would think a little bit about it and you say, you know what? I don't really want you touching my code. This is code I've worked hard on, and you don't know Python yet. You might mess my code up. So instead, wouldn't it be nice if we could ask for our friend's name outside of our code? So they don't have to risk messing up our beautiful Python. So that's what we're going to do now. And it's like the opposite of print. Print prints things on the console, and input gets things from the console. And it, like print, takes some, and these words are like a prompt, right? What is your question mark? And here, we're going to need a place for our name to go, right? Our name can't just live anywhere. It needs to have a home. It needs to have a box, per se. So does anyone have any ideas on a type of box I might be able to use to put my name inside of? This one's a hard one.
Kevin, what do you mean by a type of box?
Well, by type of box, I mean, that's an excellent question. A box with, say, a label, and I wanted to use that label later to go get the data I've put in my box. Well, I'm going to just plow on ahead and say, we're going to use, just like we use up here for our teachers, a box with a label. We're going to use another box, another variable was what I was looking for. And we're going to call it name. And we're going to set it equal to the input that's coming in from our console. And now down here, instead of saying Leah, I'm going to put the name we've just asked for. And now when I run our code, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to say, hey, Kevin, what is your name? And I'm going to tell it. I'm going to say it's Kevin, and I'm going to hit enter. And now all of our apology letters are customized for me, Kevin, instead of Leah. And we can run it again. And just for fun, does someone have some apology letters they'd like written? We can throw a name in there.
Sure, someone's been misbehaving.
I think so. Likely.
Although they're smart.
Yeah. Yeah. I see a hand raised. Yes. How do I get this to show the names?
Binta, you can go ahead.
Oh, I just didn't
Is
get a
it
question.
Binta? I see a Binta Barrow with a hand raised. I'm going to try that.
Say that again, Binta.
And we're going to run it. And now we have written apology letters for Binta, and Binta could go on and send all of these to Mr. Kevin, Miss Leah, Mr. Thanos. Now, Leah, I know we are, my internet connection is unstable again. I know we're a little bit light on time. Is it time for breakout rooms?
Maybe, I mean, it is time for breakout rooms. I guess let's
right.
do it. And then we can introduce all of the additional concepts that we need for our game in the breakouts.
Yep, absolutely. I think that makes sense.
Awesome. Right before we, or Jason, as you're working on the breakout rooms, our executive director, Mike Gross, just joined the call. And I wanted to pass it over to him for a couple of remarks for today's session. Mike, are you there?
I am here. Thanks so much, Jer. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to thank our volunteers from Kepler for teaching our young professionals about coding and introducing that. We know what an important skill that is in today's professional world and in the economy. So it's great for them to have a snapshot of it. And I go way back with Rick Greenberg, and so just really appreciate you guys coming in and sharing your expertise with our students today. So I will hand it back to you all to keep going.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're happy to be here.